blue is the one that works.
You devil. Hi. I'm Robert McBride of All Classical Portland. This is Carlos Kalmar, the music director of the Oregon Symphony.
Good evening.
And you are a very fortunate audience in for what is likely to be one of the most moving artistic events in Portland this season. It's a little bit odd for Carlos and I to be way up here. We're usually down there.
Yeah, let's go. Come on.
We have stage extension. You could all come up here. Wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah, but you are not allowed to move any chairs.
Yeah. So anyway, interesting week. Interesting coincidences coming together having to do with fate and artistry and history and love and respect and music and peace and joy. It all comes together so magnificently tonight, in part because of a program change. I don't know if you know about this or not, but the Hindemith Overture that was on the program no longer is, to be replaced by a piece that was near and dear to James DePreist's heart, the Adagietto from Mahler's Symphony No. 5. Brilliant, beautiful, heartfelt idea. Thank you.
Well, it was very obvious to me and to the entire crew that worked with me that when we received the message that Jimmy was, I knew beforehand that he was not doing well. So, but then when we received the message that Jimmy had died, it was very clear that we needed to do something to honor him that also goes beyond just dedicating the concert to him. And on top of that, I thought, even though we pride ourselves in Portland to be weird, it's kind of strange to talk about such a great man, which we will do tonight before the concert, and then go into the Hindemith News of the Day Overture, which is very funny. It doesn't really click. So that's why I said everybody will understand our decision to not play the Hindemith. You'll hear the Hindemith eventually because it's really a fun overture. And then what happened is that I thought that it would be nice if we get somehow in contact with Jeanette, Jimmy's wife, and ask, I knew Jimmy, so I know what his core repertoire was. But I thought maybe there is one piece or two that are where it's very much him. And in essence, we thought, first of all, out of the respect and the real care that everybody has, the community, the orchestra, also the chorus, for Jimmy. And on top of that, due to the fact that I heard it over and over, that Jimmy and Jeanette were, one of our office members said they were lovebirds. So what is better than actually remember James DePreist with a piece that he liked and which is a love song. The Adagietto of Mahler's 5th Symphony is actually not really a tragic piece. It's more a dear piece of lyrical, sometimes extremely passionate music that of course has very serious undertones. And so we thought it would be appropriate to remember James DePreist and to honor him that way. And because, if you wouldn't have said that 2 minutes ago, I wouldn't even have thought about this, but since you mentioned it, I asked the orchestra to be on stage for that, because the Adagietto is strings and harp only, but I said everybody needs to be on stage, because this was 11 years ago, matter of fact, was the last season of James DePreist as music director. This was his orchestra, so every musician has to be there. So that's how the concert begins. And then we will make a little separation before we start with the Britten. But all in all, you said it so wonderfully that this entire concert, everything comes together because it's a very human concert. It's about things that we all cherish and love. And it's for sure a concert that, in terms of spirit, through struggle, travels upwards into joy. And I think that is actually Jimmy DePreist. I mean, he was, I can tell you that I had not enormous interaction, but I know him, I knew him, and he was a wonderful colleague. I have to say that just from the professional point of view, I remember very well that it can happen, you know, when there is a transition between two music directors, there is always this, there is actually not this period, or I don't understand it as such, where in politics you will call it the lame duck period. Meaning Jimmy already knows he's on the way out and I'm not there yet, but I'm already kind of around. And Jimmy made sure from that moment that certain decisions are already in my hands, which was, there was no need to do that at all. He could have said, I am the music director until this and this day, and then Carlos can take over. No such thing. See, Jimmy, we talked. I didn't say, can you please leave these things? No, he said, I will do this, and whatever you need from me, call me anytime. I can tell you about the orchestra, the community. So, really a nice man.
Yesterday on All Classical Portland, we played DePreist's recordings off and on throughout the day, and we shared stories on the air from those of us on the staff who knew him, and a lot of listeners chimed in with wonderful stories about James DePreist. One of them had to do with a performance here of Bolero, which I missed, unfortunately, where he gave the downbeat to start the snare drummer off, and then a few times during the piece he would sort of nod at somebody before they were supposed to come in, but for the most part he just sat there and listened. Said, you guys know this piece, you can play it.
Yeah, that is. I strongly recommend all my fellow conductors, don't do that because we are going to be out of business as conductors.
Yeah. I remember the first time I met him, it was here. I had just moved to town and the orchestra was making a recording. So the Delos label engineers were here and set up a control room upstairs, and I was sitting up there listening, and then Jimmy went up to hear a playback. And he comes striding in the room, and I was the only person in the room that he didn't know, and he noticed me immediately and stopped and introduced himself and wanted to find out who I was. He was busy in that moment and had, 90 musicians on stage waiting for him, but that's the kind of guy he was. He was really cool, big-hearted, big, wonderful man.
Yeah, and an icon here.
Definitely an icon in Portland. And there's a wonderful bust of Jimmy DePreist out in the lobby. I hope you'll admire that tonight. His star on the sidewalk outside, and also in the lobby, a big table full of recordings for sale by him and by him. Oh, and that reminds me, your second recording with the Oregon Symphony is nominated for 2 Grammy Awards. The Grammys are tomorrow, and you guys are playing tomorrow, so it's another kind of confluence.
Do you understand that how important for not only all of us, but for me personally, this community is, because imagine I got, because I'm the music director and responsible for that CD that got nominated, of course I got an invitation, and I could have probably been in the same room and for sure in the after party with Beyonce and all that, but no, I'm staying here conducting. Portland.
You're familiar with the expression, which I've always found a little bit unfortunate, break a leg. Another story about James DePreist. He conducted a concert here with a broken leg that he had broken that day.
Wow, that's tough.
Yeah.
That's tough. Yeah, he was a very tough guy. I mean, he went through a lot during his life and did very, very well.
The New York Philharmonic was sharing memories of his time with them in the mid-60s. And the pictures they had were fantastic. This guy, when he was young, conducting the New York Philharmonic, really, he was handsome.
Yeah, a majestic. Well, we will hear probably, I don't know this, but I have asked one of our musicians at the top of the show to say a few words.
Oh.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's very obvious that as the artistic leader, I will say a few words, but I thought, well, I am after Jimmy DePreist. There needs to be one musician who actually, best case scenario, which we have, has been hired by Jimmy DePreist, accompanied him many few years. And I also, knowing Jimmy and hearing about him, I said, it would be lovely to have a musician who actually has a great sense of humor, because Jimmy DePreist was exactly like that. He had a great sense of humor. I don't know what is coming, but I know there will be maybe some stories.
Everybody has stories. It's fun. Okay, sir, should we talk about the pieces tonight?
Yes.
I guess maybe the Britten in particular. You know, you could do a lot of reading about Benjamin Britten and never even come across a reference to the piece that you're performing tonight. I had never heard of it until about a year ago when one of our listeners asked me if I knew it. She had sung it many years ago and said, you should know about this maybe for Club Mod. You know, this is the year of Baron Britten's 100th birth anniversary. And I looked around, we didn't have a recording of it at the station, so she bought a copy and gave it to the station, which was lovely. Why is this piece virtually unknown?
Actually, that is a question I don't know. I admit myself until probably 5 years ago, I didn't know of its existence. It was my chorus director in the Grand Park Music Festival in Chicago. He said, he wanted to do it, and of course I said, go ahead and do it. But he told me, you have to look at this piece. This is quite an underrated piece of music. Why it's not been performed, I don't know. Because it's, I mean, if I'm not lobbying, I'm not doing a sales pitch, but if you have already bought or have the intention of buying our Grammy-nominated CD, The Music for a Time of War, on that CD there is the Sinfonia da Requiem, which is in 3 movements and has a length of, I don't know, 21 minutes. This piece, or maybe only 19, I don't remember. This piece is in 3 movements. It has something to do with war, same as the Sinfonia da Requiem, and it lasts 16 and a half minutes. And in a way the structure is exactly the same, meaning there is a slow movement at the beginning, a completely crazy over-the-top scherzo in the middle, and a slow movement at the end. So structurally it's the same. But there is a huge, well, the difference is very obvious. The Sinfonia da Requiem, which is on the recording, orchestra alone. This piece, tenor, chorus, orchestra. Now, there is one unusual thing in this piece, which is how Benjamin Britten in this particular piece treats the selection of lyrics and why he picked them. Because Benjamin Britten was a stern, really stern pacifist. Peace was for him one of the most important things in life, and peace in a certain way could be said at all costs, meaning don't get armed, don't shoot, just don't. Be peaceful, which is of course a great thing, with the difference of this piece, because this piece, although the message is somehow, the underlying message is pretty much the same, which is war is horrible and we should never go. The point of the piece actually is quite accusatory, meaning it points the finger at all those Englishmen that actually stayed home when they should have gone to war. So the point of the lyrics is in part that if there is a just cause, men should actually fight for it. Now we can have endless discussions which will never end in agreeing with each other where is a just cause. But in this piece, the piece talks about you Englishmen who wipe your hands in aprons. and didn't go to defend the country. Honor the people who actually did, because they made your life possible, etc., etc., etc.
Poems by two of Britten's English contemporaries.
Yes, one of them is famous. I mean,
One is not, right?
And one is absolutely not. And I mean, here is kind of the, if you will, irony. One, W.H. Auden, very famous. That's the middle section, the completely manic scherzo. It's called Dance of Death. Mr. Swingler is the other one, and he actually was not so, I mean, as a poet, was not so well known. He was more known for leading the extreme left literary circles in Britain, mainly in London, meaning probably a communist, and which is even more interested, a communist, and says, you should have gone to war. It's really? And in essence, I mean, you hear already very serious piece of music, very substantial, very meaningful, which makes it, although there is a break between that piece and Beethoven's Symphony Number 9, it makes it, the setup is nice, because let's just call the first piece a huge struggle. Well, struggling is kind of the theme of the first movement of Beethoven's Ninth too. I mean, it's not, it takes a while until Beethoven's Ninth gets joyful. And I mean, the first movement, at least the way I understand it, it's very dramatic. It's not so much about, oh, yeah, brothers. No, it's about, first comes the struggle, then we go up. Enjoy.
And that powerful scherzo in the Beethoven Ninth with the wonderful octaves in the timpani part. I love that timpani part. Gorgeous slow movement that he can sustain for so long. Maybe Bruckner was the only other guy who could sustain a slow movement like that so well. And then that incredible finale, which begins so sternly, and then we hear this recitation of previous themes, and then the recitative-like statement of the Ode to Joy theme, and then Schiller's Ode. And it's one of the most popular pieces of classical music ever. It's performed all around the world in cultures that otherwise don't really pay a whole lot of attention to European classical music. But this piece, people grab, and it unifies everybody. And yeah, it's about joy, but it's more about the joy of all of us being in this together and recognizing that and behaving appropriately, one would hope.
Well, let's just, a few words about the poetry. This is one of the most important poets in Germany in his own time, 18th century. Friedrich Schiller, who wrote this Ode to Joy, and Beethoven read it and kind of carried the thought of, I should put this into music for years and years and years. Now the interesting part is that you don't need to go home and look up the Ode to Joy by Schiller. Not really necessary, but for knowledge, the Ode to Joy is very long, and although the Beethoven Ninth, what he uses is substantial, it doesn't even come close to what the Ode to Joy actually covers, because the Ode to Joy as written by Beethoven or used by Beethoven is actually, it's this majestic and sometimes fast, sometimes thoughtful expression of we are all brothers, let's love each other, etc., etc., and let's celebrate joy together. The poetry, though, has quite a lot of political innuendo in it, and also talks quite explicitly about drinking. So all of that, Beethoven said, no. More serious. So the selection of this is very important. And also, I think I have said this so often here from the stage, talking about the other symphonies, number 9, that we have performed. This symphony has a right to be the popular symphony that it is, because without this symphony, other composers would not even be possible. What we should do for 1 second is take ourselves back in the times when this piece was written and think how audacious Mr. Beethoven was, because this is the first symphony, at least I know of, that uses voice. Symphonies always were about orchestras, and this uses vocals. This is a symphony that is considerably longer than anything else that was written at the same time or before. So dimension, architecture. This is a symphony that, although it is very innovative, it still honors what was there before, because architecturally, structurally, the first movement is very classic. Just how it develops is very, very unusual. The idea of doing a theme and variations in the third movement the way Beethoven does it is unheard of. Nobody else. And then comes this completely, as I call it, insane fourth movement. And you might, when you listen tonight, think for one moment about, I mean, you don't have to think about that. Just enjoy. But if you, the thing is, how does the last movement start? Just that alone is like, the people at that time must have said like, oh my God, because it starts very dissonantly, very, and then cello and basses start to speak musically. It's a recitative. So the way the phrases are shaped is like somebody's talking. And then you hear the first movement appear, the second movement appear, and the third movement appear, and all the time the cello and the basses say, no, we have been there, not interesting anymore, go away. And finally you hear the first hint to the Ode of Joy, very hidden and very tentative, if you will. And then finally we get to the real thing. And the first words, the first 2 lines in the Symphony number 9 that are being sung, bass soloist, Daniel Okulic, really, really great singer, are by Beethoven. It's not Schiller, meaning this, O Freunde, friends, not that. He says, essentially he says, not that music, let us get together in something more joyful. And then starts the Ode of Joy as we know it. That thought alone is crazy. More crazy is the fact that at the time of this, when he wrote this piece, Beethoven was deaf, nearly 100%. And I don't know whether I will say it later, probably not. As soon as the piece was written and presented to his friends urged him, you have to play this piece in a concert in Vienna. And the program of the concert, which I cannot believe that it was like that, was, if that's true, Missa Solemnis and then Beethoven Symphony number 9. I would have liked to look into the throat of the singers after that. All red. Incredible. I mean, that length. And it was probably the most successful concert of Beethoven's lifetime. Only thing is, he didn't realize this. This is the famous concert where the tenor, Beethoven was actually conducting, meaning he was there beating time because he couldn't hear. He didn't know what was going on. There was a subconductor or concertmaster who was like, and finally, piece was over, audience went nuts, and Beethoven was still with his back to the audience, so the tenor took him, turned him around, and Beethoven saw everybody going crazy. The deaf Beethoven writing something like this.
You're going to reenact that little scene tonight at the end of the concert?
Well, for now I'm not deaf, and I hope.
It would have worked better when your hair was longer, actually.
Yeah. I know I sometimes need to be deceiving and have a very clean haircut. Don't worry.
We are running out of time. We must stop. Thank you so much for coming tonight. This is going to be a spectacular evening. I'm really glad you are here to be able to experience it. Carlos Kalmar.
Robert McBride.